criminal. As a Canadian federal criminal, and human rights lawyer, practicing in Ontario, and appearing before federal and provincial courts, including the Supreme Court of Canada, I present this legal brief and memorandum of argument on behalf of the minoritarian and occulted faith communities of Canada. These include practitioners of paganism, Wicca, Omnism, various occult traditions, atheism as a sincerely held worldview, parapsychological researchers, and other minority spiritual paths often mischaracterized under psychiatric scrutiny. This case challenges the application of psychiatric diagnoses, particularly schizophrenia, delusional disorder, or related conditions in the DSM-5, to individuals whose beliefs and practices involve communication with spirits, psychic abilities, blessings or rituals performed by lay practitioners, faith-induced miracles, and direct engagement with the divine or afterlife. Such pathologization infringes upon Section 2 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Freedom of Conscience and Religion, Section 2. B. Freedom of Expression and Thought, and Section 15, Equality Rights, without justification under Section 1. It also engages human rights protections under the Canadian Human Rights Act and provincial codes, as well as principles against arbitrary detention under mental health legislation. The psychiatric system in Canada, through involuntary commitments, capacity assessments, and stigma under mental health acts, e.g., Ontario's Mental Health Act, British Columbia's Mental Health Act, has historically and currently imposed a materialist, reductionist framework that dismisses minority faith experiences as delusions or hallucinations. This brief demonstrates that such claims lack immutable evidentiary foundation when weighed against verifiable research in parapsychology, consciousness studies, and comparative religion. It further proves that these faith communities are not insane or schizophrenic, but exercise protected rights equivalent to those of major recognized faiths: Christianity, Islam, Judaism, indigenous spiritualities. Their rituals, blessings, and claims of spiritual efficacy are as legitimate as those of priests, shamans, or popes. 1. The protected nature of minority and occult faiths under Canadian law. Section 2A of the Charter protects freedom of conscience and religion, broadly construed to include the right to entertain beliefs, declare them openly, and manifest them through worship, practice, teaching, and dissemination. The Supreme Court has emphasized that religion or conscience involves profoundly held personal beliefs, connecting one to the divine, a higher order, or one's spiritual faith, even if not tied to an institutionalized, particular, and comprehensive system. Atheists, agnostics, and skeptics receive equal protection. Beliefs need not be objectively true or majority accepted. Sincerity is the threshold. Syndicat Northcrest v. Amselem, 2004 SCC 47, Multani v. Commission Scolaire Marguerite Bergiais, 2006 SCC 6. Minority faiths in Canada. Paganism, nature-based polytheism or animism. Wicca, modern witchcraft with ritual magic, elements and deities. Omnism, recognition of truth in all spiritual paths. Occult traditions, esoteric knowledge, ceremonial magic, spirit work, and parapsychological study, scientific inquiry into psi phenomena, qualify. These are not pretend practices. Section 365 of the former Criminal Code, repealed in effect for sincere belief, targeted fraud, not genuine faith. Correctional Services Canada and various provinces recognize pagan/Wiccan practices in prisons, affirming their legitimacy. Atheism is explicitly protected as a belief system, rejecting theistic claims, while often affirming rational inquiry or humanism. Omnism represents an inclusive spiritual philosophy. Parasciences or parapsychology study anomalous phenomena such as extrasensory perception, ESP, psychokinesis, mind-matter interaction, precognition, and afterlife communication through rigorous experimental methods. These include Gansfeld experiments, sensory deprivation for telepathy testing, remote viewing protocols, random event generator, reg/RNG, studies on intention influencing physical systems, investigations of mediumship, near-death experiences, NDEs, and reincarnation-type cases. These are not delusions but empirical inquiries parallel to mainstream science, often conducted at institutions like Princeton's Pear Lab or the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies. The DSM-5 itself cautions against pathologizing culturally normative experiences. It notes that hallucinations or delusions must be evaluated in cultural context. What appears bizarre in one setting, e.g., spirit communication, may be normative in another, including religious or spiritual subgroups. The manual includes religious or spiritual problem, Z65.8, as a non-pathological category for distressing faith-related experiences. Critics of the DSM-5 highlight its cultural bias, Western materialist assumptions, and risk of overpathologizing normal grief, spiritual emergencies, or minority worldviews. Applying schizophrenia criteria, e.g., hallucinations, delusions, disorganized thinking, to sincere faith practices ignores this and risks discriminatory enforcement against non-mainstream groups. 2. Verifiable evidence proving the reality of spirits, afterlife communication, psychic abilities, and faith-induced miracles. The psychiatric claim that belief in spirits, afterlife contact, or psychic phenomena constitutes schizophrenia or grandiose delusion rests on an unproven materialist assumption that consciousness is solely brain-bound and dies with the body. This is rebutted by convergent evidence from multiple fields: near-death experiences, NDEs, and veridical perception. Thousands of documented cases involve individuals reporting accurate observations while clinically dead, flat EEG, no brain activity. Examples include blind persons describing visual details or patients recounting surgical procedures from an out-of-body vantage. Meta-analyses and large databases, e.g., NDERF, show consistent features: out-of-body experiences, encounters with deceased relatives, not living ones, life reviews, and transformative effects. These defy hallucination explanations, e.g., oxygen deprivation, drugs, as perceptions occur under conditions where sensory input is impossible. Researchers conclude this supports consciousness, surviving bodily death, and communication with the afterlife. Reincarnation research. The University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies has collected over 2,500 cases of the reincarnation type, CORT, primarily in children aged 2 to 5 who spontaneously recall verifiable details of a previous life, names, locations, cause of death, birthmarks matching wounds of the deceased. Many cases include medical records confirming matches. Patterns, e.g., violent death in prior life correlating with phobias, are statistically significant and cross-cultural, suggesting survival of personality or consciousness. 3027. Mediumship and anomalous information reception. A 2021 meta-analysis of modern experimental mediumship studies, 2001 to 2019, found a standardized effect size of 0.18 above chance for accurate information about deceased persons, robust to publication bias controls. This supports communication with spirits via unknown means. Psychic abilities, psi phenomena. Parapsychology provides replicable anomalies. Meta-analyses of Ganzfeld telepathy experiments yield hit rates approximately 32% versus 25% chance, with combined statistical significance, P and LT, 10-something substantial across studies. Remote viewing, e.g., Stargate program reviews by statistician Jessica Utz, showed results far beyond chance, odds like 1 in 10-20 in some datasets, replicated across labs. Pair Labs' REG studies over millions of trials demonstrated small but consistent intention-driven deviations from randomness, with operator signatures, precognition, and presentiment experiments, e.g., Darrell Bem's work and meta-analyses, show effect sizes comparable to accepted psychological findings. While skeptics cite methodological debates or file drawer effects, proponents, including Utz in congressional reviews, argue the cumulative evidence meets scientific standards for an anomalous effect requiring explanation, often framed as non-local consciousness. See TUA 813. Faith, prayer, and miracles. Studies on intercessory prayer and distant healing show mixed but positive signals in meta-analyses, e.g., approximately 57% of 23 trials in one review favored healing effects, some with significant improvements in implantation rates or wound healing. Documented remarkable recoveries after prayer, verified medically, include instantaneous or rapid resolutions of conditions. While large trials like STEP had null or paradoxical results, smaller rigorous studies and qualitative reports, e.g., in non-Western contexts, support faith's role in altering outcomes. This aligns with claims that lay practitioners, not just priests, can bless or channel effects through intention and ritual. Miracles are not impossible, but rare statistical outliers consistent with psi or spiritual mechanisms. These phenomena are verifiable upon research. Peer-reviewed journals, university archives, UVA, former pair, CIA declassified Stargate files, and meta-analyses. They prove spirit/source/divinity as non-material aspects of reality, afterlife communication as possible, and faith/ritual as mechanisms that can manifest impossible changes, e.g., healing, influence on physical systems. Occult and minority practitioners access the same capacities as recognized clergy: intention, ritual focus, altered states without hierarchical monopoly. A Wiccan circle, pagan invocation, or occultification is functionally equivalent to a Catholic blessing or shamanic ceremony under charter protections. 3. Dismantling psychiatric claims. No justification for pathologizing sincere faith. The DSM-5 requires delusions to be fixed false beliefs, inconsistent with cultural/religious norms, and causing distress/impairment. Schizophrenia demands additional symptoms and functional decline. When beliefs align with a sincere faith community, however minoritarian, they fall outside pathology per DSM guidance on cultural formulation. Spiritual emergencies or mystical experiences can mimic psychosis but resolve positively with support, not medication. Applying labels like grandiose delusions or schizophrenia to occult practitioners, e.g., claiming spirit contact or ritual efficacy or pagans' deity work, imposes a dominant materialist worldview, violating neutrality. This creates stigma, barriers to employment/housing, and involuntary treatment, arbitrary state interference. Canadian mental health laws must conform to the Charter. Pathologization without evidence of harm, beyond belief, fails minimal impairment and proportionality tests. Evidence shows many psychotic religious experiences in history, e.g., prophetic visions, parallel modern minority practices without indicating illness. Psychiatry risks repeating historical errors of labeling dissenters or minorities mad. 4. The case for infringement and remedy. The psychiatric system's routine scrutiny, diagnosis, and intervention against minoritarian/occult communities limits manifestation of beliefs, rituals, spirit work, blessings, chills expression and association, discriminates on creed/religion grounds, S. 15, lacks pressing objective, no proven societal harm from sincere practice, fraud is separately prosecutable. No Section 1 justification exists. The harm is speculative, while evidence supports the reality and benefits of these practices, e.g., transformative NDEs, healing reports. Least restrictive means include cultural competence training for psychiatrists, mandatory consultation with faith experts, and presumptive protection for sincere beliefs, absent clear danger to self/others. Requested relief in a hypothetical application or class proceeding. Declaration that diagnosing schizophrenia/delusional disorder solely on the basis of sincere occult/minority faith, beliefs/practices, spirit communication, psychic claims, ritual efficacy, violates the Charter. Injunction against using DSM-5 criteria in this manner without rigorous cultural/spiritual assessment. Damages, policy reforms for mental health acts, and education mandates. Affirmation that lay practitioners in these faiths hold equivalent spiritual authority and abilities to recognized clergy. This case restores sanity to the occult and minoritarian communities, not by medicalizing them, but by affirming their rights. Spirituality is not delusion. It is a protected path to meaning, with empirical support for its claims. The psychiatric system must evolve beyond reductionism or face constitutional reckoning. Faith communities deserve their freedom. The evidence is immutable upon open inquiry. The law demands no less.